Well, I feel a big letdown is coming, but holy cow, this feels like trade deadline day, eh, buddy?
This has been a great little weekend we've had.
I mean, the lockout's coming, but they have kept us entertained over the last few days. MLB teams adding all sorts of stuff. Welcome, everybody, to the walk-off. This is our segment called the Mailbag, and basically what we're going to do is go over our videos and our podcasts from the last week and answer your comments and questions and stuff like that from our Discord, which there's going to be a link for you to join in YouTube here. And it's free. So feel free to join in. There's a great little community there of people talking baseball and Blue Jays all the time. You can follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast and shoot us messages there. On Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. And you can also just, message us or leave your comments on the YouTube page.
I mean, if you know us well enough, fire off a text.
Sure. Yeah, right. That's for the dads.
That's for the dads and the brothers and the cousins. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well, let's start with
a beefy mailbag. So we got a beefy
mailbag to get to. I just want to point out we are recording this at 10:45 Mountain Time, which would be around midday on Tuesday morning. So if by the time you see this, you're like, why are these guys speculating about Chris Taylor? Obviously, he went to the Rockies. That's why, okay?
Yeah.
So we'll just get that out of the way up front. And we'll kind of be checking our phones for any updates that might come in over the next 20 minutes. But otherwise, let's get to the comments here. So Damien from YouTube, and this is in regard to a conversation we had about Justin Morneau not being a Hall of Famer. Right. So Damien says, how many All-Star appearances do you think equals an MVP? The Hall is for the best players, so an MVP award should automatically get you in.
Which is an interesting take.
Yeah.
Now, I'm very curious to see, and I mean, we already talked about this, but let's go over some of the MVPs from the last year and see if this is a correct statement.
All right, let's go down the list. We'll just stick with the AL first, then we'll go to the NL. So you got Shohei Ohtani, I think too soon to even really have an opinion, soon, right? Yes. Last year we had Jose Abreu of the White Sox.
Right.
Mike Trout, probably getting in.
Yeah, I mean, he could probably retire tomorrow and be in the Hall. But
Mookie Betts is well on his way, let's say.
Yeah.
Jose Altuve.
Nope, not happening.
The nope not happening is probably just because of the scandal, right?
I'm biased. Yeah.
Take the scandal out and he might have an argument for it. Then we got Mike Trout again. Then we have Josh Donaldson, who won it in 2015 with the Blue Jays.
Bringer of rain. Love him. Piece of my heart. But that is not a Hall of Famer. I hate to break it to everybody.
Agreed. Then we got Mike Trout again. Miguel Cabrera, Justin Verlander. So quite a few Hall of Famers there, likely.
You know what? As you go down the list, Darian makes a good, or was it Damien?
Damien
makes a good point. Like, as you're saying these names, I'm like, actually, you know what?
I really wanted to agree with exactly what you're going with, where I was like, well, I'm sure there's lots of guys who have won it who are just like had one good season. But no, it's a pretty deep list of
guys that probably are going to the Hall. So who knows?
So if we go a little bit further than that, we got Josh Hamilton.
Right. Okay.
Probably not a Hall of Famer. Joe Mauer, catcher for the Twins.
That could happen. Who knows?
Dustin Pedroia of the Red Sox. I don't know. Does Dustin Pedroia make it in? Maybe just because he's a Red Sox?
Well, if he doesn't, it's really because of injuries. Like, he had the opportunity to, I think. Like, he had the skills, but he missed so much. I don't know. Like, so much of the Hall is how long can you be great for, right? Yeah. So.
And then if we go back into the early 2000s, a lot of these guys are already in, like Vlad Guerrero, Ivan Rodriguez, Ken Griffey Jr., Frank Thomas, and so on. In the NL.
That's interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just like the idea of, because when I was talking with Ben Nicholson Smith and I brought this up about Justin Morneau, and it is very cool as a Canadian that he is on the list this year for Hall of Fame candidates. I didn't think he had a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Just at how long it took Larry Walker to get in,
Right.
it took him every year that he was on the ballot, and they finally pushed him through for that 75% threshold needed. I love Justin Morneau. He's had a heck of a career. I just don't see him at a Larry Walker level, but who knows? Maybe I'm full of it, and maybe Darian's right. Like, an MVP does mean you're the best player in the league at that time, and that's a fairly big accomplishment. So time will tell what the baseball writers think.
It is. I'll just quickly scan down the NL list here. We got Bryce Harper, probably having a Hall of Fame career with his second MVP award. Freddie Freeman, Cody Bellinger, probably not a Hall of Famer.
Probably not Bellinger.
Christian Yelich, probably not Hall of Famer.
Probably not.
Giancarlo Stanton, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
No.
Maybe, like, if he can stay healthy and extend. He was on a Hall of Fame trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yankees fans are going to roast me if they tune into this, but I don't think Stanton's a Hall of Famer. Chris Bryant, MVP, 2016.
I would say no there, too, yeah.
I'd say no there. Clayton Kershaw, probably an MVP, or probably a Hall of Famer. Andrew McCutchen, I would say not a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
Buster Posey, probably a Hall of Famer. Ryan Braun, probably not.
So it's a case-to-case basis here, obviously, but no, I'm a little impressed that because at first when I read Darian's comment, I was like, this is wrong. Like, an MVP win does not make you a Hall of Famer. But when you go down the list, you're like, oh, you know what? It's probably closer to that being the case than
I
not
would
being the
say
case.
it looks like 3/4 of MVP winners make it to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Which is a bigger number than I would have guessed before I looked at the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, enough time spent there. I just wanted to quickly compare. You mentioned Larry Walker, another Canadian who just made it into the Hall. If we just quickly look at his numbers compared to Justin Morneau's career numbers. So let's just go look at the big numbers here. 383 home runs for Larry Walker, 1,300 RBIs, and a career batting average of 313. Okay, so 383, 1,300, and 313. If we look at Justin Morneau's numbers. So, and again, Larry Walker barely made it in, right?
Yeah.
If we look at Justin Morneau's numbers, home runs 247,
Right.
RBIs 985, and a career batting average of 281.
See, that's elite, but it's not Hall of Fame, I don't think.
Agreed. I think that's exact. You nailed it. That's
very
good. It's not Hall of Fame. All right, let's move on from there. So Matt Finley on YouTube says, maybe a question for the mailbag, but with Bosman signed and now Robbie Ray gone to the Mariners, do the Blue Jays still pursue another pitcher or just start with Pearson in the rotation and go from there? Do you think,
they're after... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just finish off here. Do you think the Ray money now goes towards an infielder free agent, or do the Jays trade for that piece as well now?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and I think we'll know more or less the answer to this by the end of the day and see if they do make another free agent signing. There are rumors that the Jays are favorited right now to land Chris Bryant, who would probably be platooned between third and second, is my guess, would be the plan for him. There's rumors that they're in on Chris Taylor, super utility, former Los Angeles Dodger. I know that, Adam, you did a little YouTube clip on both of them earlier in the day that you can check that out and see what Mr. Mac's opinion is there. But
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
I also threw up a quick poll here, which we've got quite a few votes in on now. So just who should the Jays be adding next? And looks like 31% for Jose Ramirez. 29% for Chris Bryant, 26% voted for Chris Taylor, and 14% said we're all set between Biggio, Espinal, and Groshans. We should be able to figure something out without adding somebody. So,
okay, so I know that the rumors were when they went into this free agent class here that the Blue Jays front office had one major signing left in them, one 6-digit signing, and they did that, right? 5 years, $110 million, Kevin Gosman. So is there another $100 million contract in this team? I don't think so. However, I do think that there is the possibility of another big name coming on board through trade. So we'll see how this all plays out. I mean, if they can get Chris Bryant at, let's say, 3 years, $60 million, maybe that's something they do, a little bit higher average per year and lower years. But if not, I think they will address the infield with a trade, and we could see another free agent pitching signing, but on the lower end of things, right? A guy that's Steven Matz type of
It's just been funny to me reading the comments, the arguing back, like the pros and cons on both sides. Everybody who is in favor of Chris Taylor feels very strongly that it's a no-brainer. He's the obvious choice. And everybody who feels like Chris Bryant is just as convinced that that makes a lot more sense. So nobody really knows what's going on. I mean, Chris Bryant is about a year and a half younger, so advantage Bryant. Yeah. They both have playoff experience, which is something the Jays care about. Chris Taylor is more of a utility. Jays have definitely shown that they value hyper utility, so advantage Chris Taylor.
Yeah, versatility is big.
One other thing to consider, though, is that Chris Taylor did get a qualifying offer. So if the Jays sign him, we would lose one of our compensation draft picks. Whereas Chris Bryant, because he was traded midseason, could not be offered a qualifying offer. So if we sign Chris Bryant, we get to keep both of our compensation draft picks. So, which, by the way, I think was a factor in... Can we talk about Kevin Bosman for a second?
Yes.
Okay, so after Robbie Ray signed for basically the same contract as Kevin Gosman, a lot of people were...
Which is big.
What's that?
With an opt-out.
With an opt-out.
3 years, which is big. It is
yeah,
big.
So that's something that I think people aren't really putting enough stock in, is the fact that Kevin Gosman, like, they're very similar pitchers, and it's very similar contracts. But I think the Blue Jays really value that, being able to lock someone down for 5 years as opposed to 3. And if that was a sticking point for Robbie Ray, that he just, wanted that opt-out, then that was probably enough reason to go with Kevin Gosman instead.
And Robbie Ray has already proved that if you bet on yourself, sometimes good things happen. And this is what Ray was doing with this opt-out, right? Is betting on himself. So if in 3 years he continues to be in the Cy Young voting every year, right? If he's a Cy Young candidate every single year, in 3 years he's going to be able to look at what Max Scherzer did, right? So he's giving himself, if he does continue to do what he's doing, he's giving himself the option to be a $40 million a year guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Kevin Gosman, if he continues to dominate like he did last year, too bad. You're locked in for 5 years. So and I was reading online that some of the top analysts in baseball view this opt-out as put another $10 million on the contract. That's kind of the worth. So when you say, they got Gosman for pretty much the same contract, like $5 million more.
Right, it's actually 15 million more.
It's actually 15.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just going to put a monetary value on it.
Well, and then I do think there is value in the fact that Gosman also didn't have a qualifying offer, so we didn't have to give one up. So basically, when even if everything else was the same, and you go Ray or Gosman, but if we sign Ray, we don't get an extra draft pick. If we sign Gosman and lose Ray, we do get an extra draft pick. I think that's enough of a tiebreaker. And then when you add the opt-out on top of it.
That. Absolutely. I think that's why they did that.
All right. Well, let's move on from there. Congrats to Ray for getting your money, and Kevin, welcome to the Jays. We're excited to have you. But moving on here. So Drinker of Beer in Discord. Now, this isn't Blue Jays related, but this one is, how did you guys meet, and how did you start the podcast?
Ooh, this is a fun one. especially considering we've got so many new viewers and listeners over the last little bit.
Great time for this
Adam
question.
Adam and I are stand-up comedians, and we actually met in March of 2020. We were paired together on a tour, and we were basically doing charity shows throughout Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And so we were on the road together for about a week and we were talking baseball, and Adam was even saying, man, this is fun. Like, you should run a Blue Jays podcast, Scott. And I was like, I'm too busy. I'm on the road all the time. We were literally in Regina on the Wednesday, the night that, so we're sitting there waiting to start the show about 30 minutes before showtime. On the televisions, all of a sudden the U.S. declares a national emergency, right? And then it goes, Tom Hanks has coronavirus. And then on top of that, the NBA pulled the plug on the season. And Adam and I are like, can we have these TVs shut off? Like,
killing the mood.
We need to
here.
be funny in 30 minutes. Yeah. So we were pretty much on the road together as the world shut down. And of course, Adam continued to live his life, and I went back home and went into like a 2-month depression about I've lost all my gigs and my work is gone. And then Adam reached out and he was like, hey, like, should we do this Blue Jays podcast? Like, we're not on the road, we're not working, we're not doing anything. And so that's kind of how it started.
Yep.
And July 6th, 2020 was our first episode. And here we are 18 months later, and a huge thank you to all you listeners, because we've gone from 30 listeners an episode to thousands, and it means the world.
It's very cool. All right, moving on now to Shane Lambert from Twitter says, now what I also wonder is, are we missing something that can't be fixed by signings or trades? To have that much individual success, and I think he's talking about all the awards and the MVP nominations, the Cy Young, the Gold Gloves, the Silver Sluggers, it goes on and on. What the Jays were able to win this year.
I think you're right. I think that's probably exactly what he's talking about.
But still not making the playoffs is something that is quite rare. Or is it just the reality of being in the AL East?
What do you think? I think it's the AL East. I think that to look at this team and think that there's something maybe culturally wrong within the clubhouse, or that it's... Now, listen, we could probably talk about whether Montoyo was a problem or not for a whole episode.
I mean, I think it was a combination of the AL East is always kind of like this, but also I think this year was a bit of an anomaly. Like, it is just crazy that 4 teams in the same division have 91 wins or more.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Insane.
To have 3 in the same division with 91 wins is pretty uncommon. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I would imagine that doesn't happen every year either. So to have 4 is absurd.
General rule of thumb is you'd like 90 wins. If you get 90 wins, you're in the playoffs.
You're feeling pretty good,
like,
yeah.
For the most part, that's the case.
So does any of this fall on Charlie Montoyo's shoulders? You know, is he the reason that we weren't able to take a very solid stack of superstars and convert it into more wins? As much as I'd love to say yes, because I'm not a big Charlie Montoyo supporter, I don't know really how to blame this one on him. The bullpen.
I feel the same
really,
way. Like, internally, it's tough to just.
I really feel like he did the best with what he had to work with. Now, were there maybe some games that we blew late where a guy could have been pulled earlier or a guy could have been left in longer? Sure, but unless we're hiring a manager with a crystal ball, I don't know how we improve on that.
Like, we could play this game with every organization in baseball, right? Go over games and be like, that was a problem with that was a bad managerial move. That was a bad managerial move. Like,
what I would
you'll drive yourself crazy if you play that game.
Exactly. Absolutely crazy. Especially in hindsight. What I would say, though, is I do think the youth was a factor. The inexperience of playing that 162 game grind. You know, we look at guys like Vladdy and Bo and all these kids who are leading the team. They played 60 games last year, and the year before was a partial season, right? They got called up partway through. They weren't really involved in a playoff race. I don't think the guys really understood that
The grind.
the grind of, you know, of when you're just not feeling it, but you still got to figure out a way how to win the second game of a doubleheader in May.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that game is the difference between a 91 win season and watching the playoffs and a 92 win season and, you know, maybe going to the ALCS, right? The team got a massive dose of reality this year, and I think that all the signings aside, that is going to be the biggest improvement going into 2022, is that I think you're going to see a team that's hungry, that felt like they came up short, which they did. But I think this team is going to just have that willpower to grind out an extra 10 wins next year.
Experience is massive, and you see it time and time again with teams that become juggernauts, like the Houston Astros. Did the Houston Astros happen in a vacuum? Did it happen overnight? Absolutely not. Look at Kansas City. Look at the Royals back in 2013 when they started to dominate, right? They go to the World Series in 2014 and come up short, and then 2015 is their year, right? Like when you look at a core of guys, which is what the Blue Jays are working right now, and Vladdy and Bo and Gurriel and just the list goes on and on. Teoscar, of guys that have come up the ranks together. They are accumulating experience that is invaluable, and they are accumulating a will to win, because you need to learn how to be a team and how to fight through the dog days of summer and how to, I mean, you look back on this season and there's no way that there's not certain plays that just these guys literally wake up in a cold sweat having a nightmare about, you know? Like, if you don't think Marcus Semien doesn't still think about that third out where he lobbed the ball from second base over top of Vladdy's head and then the whole game unraveled, like that would have been the game that would have made them
And there's 35 examples of that.
And there's 35 examples of that, exactly, not to pick on Semien.
Well, he's gone now. Screw him.
But he's gone. Screw him. No.
No, I don't know. Am I being is this too much of a hot take to say that it's the hardest part about winning a World Series is making the playoffs?
No. The Atlanta Braves proved that.
Right? Like once you're there, anything can happen, right? And
anything can happen, and if you're hot at the right time, right?
But that's
like,
the thing is it's hard to stay hot for 6 months and to get to 90 plus wins, right?
So it cannot be done. You cannot stay hot for 162 games. But think about the Blue Jays. If they had been in a position where they were a playoff-bound team and they had their September that they had this year in October.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
World Series champs.
Unstoppable.
All right, let's move on.
Unstoppable. Darius Huber from Twitter says, where does this team go from here now that Bosman and Garcia have been added?
That is the question of the offseason, really. I love it. I mean, they need a third baseman still or some sort of infield help. They need another starting pitcher. We could see, depending on what happens trade-wise, because I think some of their issues will be addressed through trade, which could create other holes. So maybe if they move some catching depth, they might need to go out and get an experienced catcher, which is all stuff that's probably going to happen after the lockdown. I think that the Jays may make one more move today before that happens, and then we're all in wait mode. And we sit around and twiddle our thumbs until February, March. Who knows how long it could go. I know that I was reading just this morning that the MLB and the union sat down, and their meeting lasted 25 minutes, which doesn't bode well.
Or they're very close.
Accomplished, or they're very close, and I guarantee that is not the case. Yeah. So we'll see. Where do the Blue Jays go from here? Lots of needs still to address. The bullpen needs to be addressed still. There are some signings that need to happen or some trades to fill some holes. we may be sitting around waiting for this the answer to this question for months.
And I think we likely will. One question for you. At this point, the shortstop free agent class has almost dried up. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect almost all of them to be gone before December 1st. So we're left with Trevor Story. We're left with Carlos Correa. We're left with Andrelton Simmons. And then a couple other guys. Freddie Galvez. Do you think Story and Correa are both signed in the next day and a half?
Maybe. Listen, the Texas Rangers have completely screwed the shortstop market. Like $325 million for Corey Seager. And don't get me wrong, Corey Seager is a phenomenal talent. I kind of viewed this year's shortstop class as it would be Carlos Correa number 1 around $300 million, and everyone would fall in line after that. I mean, Javi Baez just signed 6 years, $140 million. That seems insane. And I know there's probably going to be some ex-Cubs fans and some Dodgers fans that are like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. These guys are the best players in the world, and that's a fair take. It just seems like so much money. $175 million to Marcus Semien? I love Semien.
They gave out $500 million.
$500 million to their infield. Like
that's insane.
So do I think Carlos Correa is going to sign? He might not, because if Corey Seager is making $325 million, I hate to break it to everyone, Carlos Correa is getting $400 million.
Well, he's not getting less than $325.
He's definitely not getting less than $325. Where are you at on this?
I don't know. I can see a panicked owner giving him a contract, but I can also see
the Yankees, perhaps.
Yeah, the Yankees need a shortstop. The Yankees have money, but I don't know. I mean, at this point, I didn't. Okay, last year when we were going over our list of free agent shortstops and potential landing spots for shortstops, I didn't have the Texas Rangers on my list, and they took two of them.
Yeah.
So that's basically like playing musical chairs and then having someone come in and just take 2 extra chairs away.
Man, if the Yankees wind up with Andrelton Simmons, that would be the greatest thing in the history of baseball.
It would be
I would
good.
love that so much.
So I don't know.
The Yankees are like, all the chairs are full.
There's a real opportunity here for teams to miss out, and I don't think the Yankees are going to let that happen. So do they come in aggressively now and panic, or I don't know. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got Bo.
All right.
I'm glad we've got Bo. A couple more here to get to.
Okay. Which, by the way, thank you so much for everyone for being so interactive and being so forthcoming in the community. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. Last year we had to answer every one of these comments on the mailbag because we were only getting 5 or 6 all week long. So now we actually get to pick. Okay, so Marcus G on YouTube says, great get on Shai Davidi, who came back for his second time on the show. Mm-hmm. With such a broad range of topics and the long run time, timestamps would be appreciated in the future. So I guess I just want to put it out there to all of you guys. Do you share Marcus's view that timestamps would be a big value add to the show notes?
And if a bunch of you feel this way, please speak up, because we haven't been doing it because, and I'll be honest, it's a little bit extra work. But if there's a huge push and all of you feel this way, then we can put in the extra effort. But if this is only a few of you,
Scott is volunteering me for more work, and I appreciate that. I will begrudgingly do it. It is about an extra half an hour to an hour for me to go through a 50-minute video and make timestamps for topics. Or I have to be less involved in the interview and take notes as we go, and I really don't want to have to do that.
Which is another comment we've been getting, that people want you more involved in interviews.
Exactly, right? So So yeah, just let us know. We appreciate the feedback. We're getting a lot of feedback on our volume, and I know that's something that Scott and I have been trying to sort out as well. Part of it has to do with the fact that Scott and I aren't together in the same room. We're recording this over Zoom, so when we have a third person join us for our interviews, if the gain on their microphone is set differently, it's hard for me on my end to record Scott and them at different levels and then have
Equal
it balanced.
volumes.
I'm not like a audio engineer, so I'm
Yeah.
just doing. If anybody is an audio engineer and wants to
Help us.
volunteer to help out, by all means, shoot us a message, and that's a serious offer.
What I love too is all our new listeners are like, your guys' volume is too low, and all of our old listeners are like, literally, their sound is so much better than it used to be.
Exactly. We've gone from a 1 to a 6. So,
Yeah. Working our way up to 10.
We're working on it. Absolutely. All right. And then this leads into the next question here. So Link Hampton on YouTube also suggests, just a suggestion, you guys, but maybe alternate asking questions or find some ratio that works for you. This way you're both involved in the conversation. Great interview though.
Well, and thank you for that. And honestly, this is something, and maybe, and Adam and I always work at trying to both being as involved as possible. One of our biggest problems is that we are on Zoom, and so there is just that minuscule time lapse between us when we're in an interview, and we have found that if one person takes the lead, that there's a better flow between the guest and us. However, that said, there are things we can do, and I love so much that people want to hear what you have to say too, Adam, which is obviously what it is, and I feel the same way. I think you're filled with great baseball knowledge, so this is something that we'll take into account. We always appreciate everyone's advice.
We'll continue to work on that for sure. I know in some of our interviews that we've done in the last year, we started doing like a foul territory segment towards the end of it, where that was kind of my opportunity to ask just some weird questions that weren't necessarily baseball related, right? Like, you know, what's your favorite meal to eat on the road, and which stadium has the best beer, and all this kind of stuff, right? So, but yeah, I mean, Scott and I, we do both contribute the questions or the talking points that get brought up. That is definitely a collaborative process that happens behind the scenes. We're both kind of compiling listener questions and stuff for our guests from the various sources. I know Scott runs the Twitter, I run the Instagram. We both kind of manage the Discord, and we equally neglect the Facebook. So it's definitely a collaborative process, even though Scott is the one who ends up leading the interview at that point. But it is something that we will continue to work on, and we appreciate the input all the same. So thank you for that.
All right. Is that all the questions?
Last one I had here. Now, this is from Jeremy in Kamloops, and he just texted me this morning and said, what are your thoughts on the 14-team playoff that the MLB owners have proposed? I guess that just came out this morning.
We've talked about this before. I know you're all for it, right?
Yeah, at least 14. Give us 16, maybe.
See,
I like the expanded playoffs.
I'm like, let's make it 12. Take 2 of those away. I don't need to see 14 teams in the playoffs. But, I mean, it depends on your view of baseball and everyone. Listen, there is a serious problem in baseball with teams tanking. It is really frustrating to watch 15 teams a year be complete garbage. And maybe more teams in the playoffs will eliminate this problem. So
did you see Boris's suggestion to help prevent teams from tanking?
No.
It was have a minimum win threshold and then lose draft picks if you don't get that many wins.
I like that.
So if you're under, let's just say 75 wins, you lose a draft pick. I don't know which draft pick you'd lose, right? That's something they'd have to figure out, you know, what price is too steep and what price is just right. But in any case.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Just a quick heads up, by the way, we are talking with Hagen Danner, who was just recently added to the Blue Jays 40-man roster tomorrow afternoon. So if you do have any questions for Hagen, feel free to message us. join the Discord. Drop us a line here, and we'll get that out to him. He was actually drafted as a catcher and came up through the system, and then was converted to a pitcher. And this is a man who is now throwing 100 miles an hour. He's 25 years old. Again, just added to the 40-man roster. So the Blue Jays were obviously worried about somebody taking him in the Rule 5 draft. This is a guy that's very similar story to, let's say, a Taylor Cicero or a Kirby Sneed. You know, we could wind up seeing him in this Blue Jays bullpen as early as mid-next season. So excited to chat with him.
Very cool. All right. Cheers, guys. And if there's a big breaking news piece, like we signed Chris Bryant to retrade for J-Ram or something later today, we'll come back on and we'll address it.
Absolutely.
So, okay, take care.
All right.